You thought they were finally opening up. You thought the connection was real. Then, just like that, they pulled away. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And now you're stuck staring at your phone, playing detective in your own story. Are they gone for good? Are they ever coming back? Hi, I'm Jim Rohn, and if you've ever been on the receiving end of a relationship with someone emotionally avoidant, you already know how painful it is when someone chooses distance over depth. Here's what most people don't understand. An avoidant ex doesn't come back because they suddenly realize your value. They come back after cycling through a quiet emotional process that takes time, space, and a series of internal stages that most people never see. That's exactly what we're going to unpack in today's video. Giving the avoidant distance is your superpower. Each phase reveals something critical: what they feel, what they're avoiding, and why your silence might be louder than any words you could have said. If you're tired of wondering, if you're done blaming yourself, and you want to finally understand what's actually going on behind their distance, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel if this kind of deep, emotionally intelligent content is something you want more of. This is where we break the cycle where confusion turns into clarity and self-doubt becomes self-worth. The greatest paradox of avoidant attachment lies right here. They deeply crave love and simultaneously fear being loved fully. They long for intimacy, connection, and deep understanding. Yet when it arrives clear, sincere, and consistent, their nervous system interprets it as a threat. And that's where the heartbreak begins for you, the one who simply wants to love them, hold them, understand them, because your loving presence somehow becomes pressure in their eyes. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they never learned how to receive healthy love. This paradox makes the avoidant behave as though they want out, when in reality, they're terrified of how deeply they care. The closer you get, the more they withdraw. The more patient you are, the more threatened they feel. The more consistent you become, the more suffocated they get. And suddenly, you, the one loving them wholeheartedly, find yourself lost, asking, "What did I do wrong?" The answer is, nothing. You're simply dealing with a nervous system that never learned how to feel safe in closeness. But then something shifts when you begin to withdraw your emotional energy. When you're no longer the one initiating, checking in, showing up without fail. At first, they exhale. They feel relieved, as if released from something too intense. They enjoy the silence like a temporary victory. No emotional demands, no expectations, no requirement to feel. But that relief doesn't last, because it isn't healing, it's avoidance. And when there's no one watching, no eyes caring, no sense of being needed, something unexpected begins to rise. Emptiness. It's not dramatic pain, not loud sorrow. It's the quiet dullness of a life that's faded, flattened, missing a color they can't name. And here's the magic: your absence makes that louder than any word you could say. Now, your role isn't to rush back or quickly respond when they begin to test the waters. Your role is to stand firm in your self-respect, knowing that your presence was a gift, and now your absence is a lesson. You were never the problem, you were the mirror. And when you walked away, not out of revenge, but out of love for yourself, you gave them a chance to see who they really are. You don't have to shout your worth. The space you've created speaks volumes. The first stage after you create distance, no more texting, checking in, or keeping the emotional thread alive, is when the avoidant feels an immediate sense of relief. It's like they've been released from something heavy, though that weight was simply your consistent, loving presence. They no longer have to respond emotionally, manage someone else's feelings, or show up in a way that scares their nervous system. And to them, that space feels like freedom. At first, they might seem genuinely happy now, throwing themselves into work, spending more time with friends, being suddenly more active on social media. You might even see pictures of them smiling, posting motivational quotes, maybe even dating someone new. And it all appears to reinforce what they've always claimed: I'm better off alone. But beneath that performance is not peace, it's avoidance. They are not healing, they are escaping. Their busyness becomes their hiding place. Their detachment becomes a shield. Social media becomes a stage to broadcast a version of themselves that even they don't fully believe. This is where many partners of avoidance get confused. They assume this performance means they've been forgotten, and they panic. They reach out again, hoping to fix what they assume they broke. But what you need to know is this. This phase is just the beginning of a deeper psychological unraveling. And if you stay strong, if you don't take the bait, if you don't return just because they look fine, you'll allow something powerful to emerge. Phase 2. The emotional vacuum. Here, the illusion of relief begins to fade. Your absence stops being a comfort and starts becoming a loss. They can't name it, but they feel it. Something familiar, grounding, safe, is gone. Not dependency, but the loss of emotional stability. The version of you who saw them, held space for them, loved them without demanding, is no longer there. They may not say, "I miss you," but they'll feel the absence. They'll scroll your stories, check for any hint that you still care. They'll ask mutual friends questions disguised as just curious, while secretly hoping to feel remembered. And this is where your self-respect becomes your compass. You don't return to be their emotional crutch. You stay rooted in your growth, allowing the silence to speak what words never could. You were the steady one, and now they're feeling what they never wanted to admit: you mattered. Phase 2, the emotional vacuum, is when the avoidance illusion of peace starts to unravel. At first, your silence felt like freedom to them, but then something begins to feel off. Not in a dramatic, movie scene kind of way, more like a subtle emptiness creeping into everyday life. They can't name it, but something's missing. And slowly, they realize what they're missing is you. Avoidants rarely connect directly to their core emotions. Instead, they respond to emotional instability with distance or numbness. But without you, the one who once quietly anchored them with patient presence, grounded love, and emotional consistency, something shifts. There's no one buffering their mood anymore. No more late-night conversations. No more silent understanding. No more emotional safety wrapped in your everyday words. At first, they won't link these feelings to you. They'll just feel off, restless, dull, disconnected. But they'll start checking your story views, scrolling your social feed, asking mutual friends how you're doing, all under the guise of casual curiosity. In reality, it's their dormant longing waking up again, a longing they still won't admit. And then, something profound happens. The comparison begins. This is the turning point when the emotional void turns into awareness. Suddenly, they begin realizing that what you offered isn't easy to find elsewhere, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You were present. You stayed when others didn't. You understood without demanding. If they're seeing someone new, the cracks begin to show quickly. The new person doesn't get them like you did. They don't tolerate the avoidant shutdowns. They don't stay soft when walls go up. And it starts to dawn on the avoidant. Maybe the problem wasn't you. Maybe it's their own capacity for connection. If they're not seeing anyone, the comparison is even sharper. Loneliness returns not from being single, but from lacking you. The emotional safety you brought becomes more precious in absence. They miss being seen without explanation. They miss the calm, the clarity, the non-reactive love you gave. And here's the powerful part. You didn't have to lift a finger. Your silence, honest, rooted, self-respect hinges enough. You become a reference point they can't forget. And even if they try to downplay you, the comparison is alive within them. This is where your inner power shines. Not because you won, but because you stopped chasing. And for the first time, they're the ones realizing what they've lost. When you remain committed to the distance you've created, not responding to their subtle signals, not returning to be their emotional supplier like before, a new kind of emotion begins to creep into the avoidant's inner world. Fear. No longer is it the comfort of freedom. No longer a vague discomfort. Now it's a sharp, clear anxiety. The fear that you might be truly gone this time. People with avoidant attachment styles live with a deep paradox. They fear abandonment, yet their behaviors constantly create the very outcome they dread. It's a protective reflex they developed early on. I'll hurt you before you have the chance to hurt me. That's why, when they pulled away, they did so assuming you would eventually come back like always. But this time is different. This time, you haven't returned. And that shakes the foundation of one of their deepest assumptions, that you were always available, that no matter how many times they distanced themselves, you'd still be there, that your love had no edges, no conditions, no end. Now, the reality begins to set in. Your continued absence becomes more than a break, it becomes a wake-up call, a mirror. And for the first time, they must confront the possibility that they may have lost something irreplaceable. This fear isn't abstract anymore. It becomes concrete, felt in the everyday moments. A morning without your presence, an afternoon without your check-ins, a week with no messages, no reminders that someone out there is still holding space for them. And it begins to spiral into a state they don't know how to manage, emotional passivity mixed with a desperate longing to act. If you pay close attention, you'll notice the shift. They'll begin inching back carefully. Maybe they view your Instagram stories, like a post, or send a neutral, non-threatening message like, "Hope you're doing well." These aren't accidents. They're emotional sonar pinging to see if you're still there. But the real difference now, they're no longer in control. Your distance has upended the dynamic. And slowly, they start to realize they've become emotionally dependent on your response even if they don't say it out loud. And here's the most important thing. This is not your cue to go back. This is not the time to reassure them, to rescue them, to ease their fear. This is the moment to stand even more rooted in your self-respect. Not as punishment, but as a path to truth. Because if they are ever going to face their own patterns, this fear of permanent loss might be the doorway. If they truly want to return not out of fear, but out of readiness, out of real growth, you will know. It will look different. It will sound different. It will feel different. But if they only return because they're afraid of being alone, because they miss you in the way we miss familiar comforts, not because they're ready to show up fully, then you'll only fall back into the old, exhausting loop, the one where you give, they retreat, and you hurt. Fear of loss is a potent emotional trigger, but it only has value if it leads to transformation. Without change, it's just emotional turbulence. And you deserve more than that. After the wave of fear of losing you comes a deeper stillness where the avoidant must finally look inward. This is no longer just emotional reactivity, it's personal reckoning. And often, this phase is quiet, even invisible to those around them. But internally, a series of questions loops on repeat like echoes. Why didn't I value what I had? Why couldn't I let myself love? Why was it so hard to just be close to someone who cared? This is the moment when they begin to recognize what they've truly lost. Not just you as a person, but the experience of being loved safely, steadily, and sincerely. Something they couldn't accept at the time because it was too real, too intimate, too threatening to their sense of control. And now that you're no longer there to reflect back their goodness and value, they begin to see, with unsettling clarity, the issue wasn't you, was them. They don't just miss you. They begin to mourn the version of themselves they couldn't allow to show up, the part that was too afraid, too guarded, too locked in old coping strategies. And this regret, if felt fully, can become a catalyst for growth. But just as easily, it can become another phase of emotional paralysis if they don't take action. What you must remember is this: their regret doesn't equal readiness. Avoidance can feel deep remorse and still not change. They can reflect, even admit fault, but continue behaving the same. Because self-awareness alone isn't transformation. Sometimes, it only buries them deeper in shame and inaction. If they're serious about change, you won't hear it only through words. You'll see it in responsible action. They'll go beyond, "I'm sorry." They'll ask, "What can I do differently?" They won't just miss your presence. They'll work to become someone who can sustain connection. They won't just come back because they're lonely. They'll return because they've grown. But if they reappear with the same lines, "I was wrong," "I miss you," "You're special," and no new behavior to show for it, then you need to be grounded enough to recognize this is a repeat, not a repair. Regret is a double-edged sword. It can open the path to healing, or it can pull you right back into the emotional loop you've already outgrown. And now, it's not about how deeply they feel. It's about how clearly you choose what kind of love you're still available for, and what kind you'll never accept again. After experiencing the fear of permanent loss and a quiet period of regret, if the avoidant still feels emotionally connected to you, they won't usually come back with a full apology or a courageous declaration of change. Instead, they enter the testing the waters phase, where every action is deliberate, subtle, and emotionally risk-free. For someone with avoidant tendencies, expressing direct vulnerability is terrifying. So rather than texting, "I miss you," or "Can we talk?" they'll take the backdoor approach. You might notice them watching your stories more often, liking your older posts, or posting vague captions that hint at shared memories. These are not coincidences, they're signals. Emotional feelers sent out to see if you're still emotionally available. If you respond to these signs, whether through interaction, a like back, or a soft reply, they slowly increase their presence. A message like, thinking of you, or hope you're doing well, isn't just small talk, it's an emotional thermometer. They want to know, have you truly closed the door, or is it still slightly open? This is the moment where your emotional clarity becomes your protection, because this type of outreach can feel tender and hopeful. You might think, they finally realize they miss me. But pause and ask yourself, do they miss you, or do they just miss the emotional comfort you provided? Are they returning to co-create a healthier relationship, or are they revisiting the past out of loneliness or fear? Real intimacy does not begin with hints or half steps. It begins with presence, accountability, and clarity. And you, someone who's already experienced the hurt of inconsistency, no longer owe your heart to vague messages and emotional guessing games. If they're truly ready, they'll move beyond emotional breadcrumbs. They'll show up with honesty, with tangible steps, with a real desire to build differently this time. But if they keep circling, sending out feelers, pulling back when it gets real, you must remember, not everyone who comes back deserves re-entry. Distance, it might seem like a passive approach, but in reality, it is an intentional act of self-respect, of loving with boundaries, and of having the courage to choose yourself. When you understand it deeply, you'll see that distance isn't just about coping, it's your emotional superpower, especially when you're navigating a connection with an avoidant partner. Absence crée longing. When you're no longer consistently present, no more texts, no more emotional availability, no more checking in, your value becomes clearer to them. Not because you're playing a role or manipulating, but because you've stopped offering yourself unconditionally. And in that space, they finally confront a feeling they've long suppressed. They miss you. Fear of loss sharpens clarity. As your absence continues, what was once familiar now becomes irreplaceable. They begin to realize they gave up something real and safe in the name of freedom, and now they're afraid. Not of your anger, but of your indifference. They begin to fear you may truly be gone. Cognitive dissonance takes over. Your distance creates an emotional conflict in their mind. I don't need anyone clashes directly with, I can't stop thinking about them. That discomfort drives them inward. If they have even a small ounce of emotional courage, they'll begin exploring what this really means. Maybe not to win you back, but to confront the truth inside themselves. You become their mirror. When you no longer pursue, no longer try to close the gap, no longer soften to maintain connection, you reflect back their own behavior to them. They experience what it feels like to be held at a distance. And in that space, if they're truly awake, they begin to understand, this is what they did to you. But here's the most important truth. Your power isn't about getting them to wake up. It's about the fact that you already did. You are no longer the one who chases, no longer the one who needs to be needed, no longer the one who trades self-worth for crumbs of affection. You chose you, and that is a choice that cannot be undone. Hold your distance, not to manipulate, not to punish, not even to provoke a return, but to protect your peace, honor your healing, and make room for the kind of love that is mutual, mature, and deeply aligned. This is your superpower. To love without losing yourself, to walk away without closing your heart, to stay rooted in your worth, even when someone else cannot meet you there. And once you discover that, whether they return or not, you've already won. Creating effective distance is not a psychological game mate, is an act of emotional maturity and personal integrity. It doesn't come from trying to manipulate someone into changing. It comes from a place of choosing to pause in order to protect your own emotional balance. If you've been the one constantly reaching out, initiating, and carrying the emotional laborthus, is your moment to reclaim your energy and reset your position in the relationship. 1. Truly disappear. No half measures. Stop texting, liking, tagging, checking stories, or casually interacting through mutual friends. This isn't about punishment, it's about cutting off the emotional supply line they've come to rely on without reciprocating. They will feel your absence, and that's where real shift begins. 2. Emotionally detach. Stop making decisions based on how they might feel. Don't ask yourself, will this hurt them? Or, what if they think I'm being cold? Instead, shift your focus back to you. Reinvest in your work, your wellness, your healthy relationships, and personal goals. That inner recentering doesn't just heal you, it makes you magnetic in a deeper way. 3. Hold strong boundaries. If they reach out, you set the tone. This isn't about being cold, but being clear. You choose the level of engagement that feels emotionally safe and aligned. Just because someone comes back doesn't mean they get to be received like before. You don't respond to please, you respond to protect your worth. 4. Rebalance your position. Distance is not just space, it is your statement that you are no longer the pursuer. You are shifting from being constantly available to being valuable. And this shift in dynamism, they still care, forces them to approach you from a completely different emotional energy. Giving distance isn't a punishment, it's the declaration of a self-aware heart. I can love deeply, but I won't lose myself to keep someone who isn't ready. Here's the truth. When you begin to give distance, it may feel scary. You fear losing them. You fear they might never come back. You fear you're being too harsh. But what you're really doing isn't abandoning the relationship, it's reclaiming yourself. You've already loved with patience, softness, and hope. You've waited, listened, adjusted. That alone makes you worthy of a love that shows up clearly, consistently, and with maturity. So this distance you're holding, it's not a wall. It's a doorway to a higher standard of connection and emotional respect. If the avoidant has the courage to face themselves, to return with commitment and change, they'll walk through that door. And if they don't, you still win because you've refused to shrink yourself for someone's comfort. Real love doesn't hide, doesn't test, doesn't play emotional chess. It shows up, it chooses, it grows. That's what you deserve, and every step you take now should protect that standard. Hold your boundaries like they're sacred. Let your silence speak louder than any chasing ever could. And remember, you don't need to be chosen, you only need to choose where your heart is truly safe to bloom.